The twin suns of Varloth Prime burned hot and cruel over the crowded market streets. Commander Eric Vance walked slowly through the slave bazaar, his boots kicking up clouds of red dust. Around him, the noise of shouting vendors, clanging cages, and desperate cries filled the air. The smell of sweat, metal, and fear was thick enough to taste. Everywhere he looked, beings from dozens of worlds were chained and displayed like goods. Young, old, strong, weak. Some begged for help. Others sat silently, their eyes hollow, their spirits already broken. Eric ignored them all. He wasn't here to save anyone. At least, that's what he told himself. His mission was simple: find a slave valuable enough to trade with Overlord Drax. In return, Drax would give him what he needed: the Valorian Cube, an ancient artifact said to hold unimaginable power. Eric needed that artifact. Without it, Earth's outer colonies would fall. Without it, millions could die. He pushed deeper into the market, the worst areas, the places even the brave didn't go without backup. But Eric wasn't afraid. Not today. At the far end of the market, he found her. Caged alone, half hidden under a broken tarp, sat a young alien girl. Her skin was a soft shade of silver blue, marked with glowing tattoos that pulsed faintly with life. Her eyes were large, bright violet, and filled with silent defiance. A thin metal collar dug into her neck, connected to heavy chains bolted into the ground. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply stared back at Eric, unblinking. Something about her stopped him cold. He checked the tag hanging from her cage. Unclaimed. Untamed. Dangerous. Special lineage suspected. A nearby merchant noticed him looking. "You have fine eye, human," the merchant hissed, showing sharpened teeth. "She rare, very rare. Most fear her. Good price, very good trade." Eric said nothing. He knelt beside the cage, studying the girl closely. She didn't flinch. She didn't shrink away. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as if studying him too. Eric's instincts, honed through years of war and betrayal, whispered warnings. This wasn't just another slave. There was something more behind those violet eyes, something powerful and dangerous. Exactly what he needed. Without wasting time, Eric stood and tossed a heavy pouch of credits at the merchant. The merchant's eyes gleamed greedily as he counted. "Done! She yours now! Take her! But beware!" He leaned closer, voice dropping to a sly whisper. "Not all chains hold." Eric ignored the warning. He tapped the control panel on the cage, deactivating the electric lock. The chains loosened. The girl stood slowly, never taking her eyes off him. For a moment, Eric expected her to attack, to fight for freedom. But instead, she simply stepped out of the cage and stood quietly beside him, waiting, watching, ready. Eric nodded once, approving. He handed her the end of her chain but didn't pull it. He didn't need to. She followed him without force, without a word, as if she had already made a decision of her own. They moved through the market quickly, drawing curious and fearful stares. Other merchants whispered behind their hands. A few shook their heads sadly. A human walking so casually with her? Foolish. Dead man walking. Eric didn't care. He could feel the weight of his decision pressing on him already. But he pushed it aside. He had a job to do. Save Earth. At any cost. Even if it meant selling a living being to a monster like Drax. Even if it meant trading a soul for a weapon. The girl walked silently beside him, her bare feet barely making a sound on the cracked stones. At one point, a small boy ran out from a side alley waving a toy sword. The girl flinched, only slightly, but Eric noticed. Without thinking, he stepped between her and the boy, shielding her until the boy's mother dragged him away. The girl looked up at him, puzzled. No one had ever protected her before. Not even for a second. She said nothing. But something changed in her eyes. Something quiet and deep. Something dangerous. They reached the black gates of Drax's fortress, just as the suns dipped low. casting long, twisted shadows across the blood-colored ground. Two massive guards, clad in dark armor, lowered their spears as Eric approached. "You have offering," one growled. Eric stepped aside, letting them see the girl. The guards exchanged looks. One grunted and turned to open the gates. "You may enter. Overlord awaits." As the heavy gates creaked open, Eric felt a cold wind brush against his skin. He tightened, his grip on the girl's chain, not to drag her, just to feel that she was still there. Still real. Still a part of this terrible deal he was about to make. And deep inside, a tiny voice he tried to ignore whispered, "This is wrong." But he silenced it, because in the dangerous games of Varloth Prime, doubt was death. And tonight, Eric Vance would play the most dangerous game of all. The gates of Drax's fortress slammed shut behind them with a sound like thunder. Inside, the world changed. The walls were made of black stone that seemed to drink the light. Tall statues of ancient warlords stared down at Eric with cold, lifeless eyes. Fires burned in strange colors, green, blue, and violet, casting long, eerie shadows across the floor. At the far end of the great hall sat Overlord Drax. Massive and terrifying, he lounged on a throne made from the bones of creatures Eric couldn't even name. His skin was dark gray, rough like old iron, and thick chains wrapped around his arms like decorations. His eyes, small, yellow, and cruel, locked onto Eric immediately. A slow, dangerous smile stretched across his face. "So," Drax rumbled, his voice deep enough to shake the stone walls, "the human brings me a gift." Eric stepped forward, keeping his face calm. He gave a slight bow, but not too low, showing respect, not weakness. "I bring what you asked for," Eric said clearly. He pulled the alien girl gently forward by the loose chain. Drax leaned forward, studying her with greedy eyes. The hall grew silent. Only the crackling of strange fires filled the heavy air. The Overlord rose from his throne, his heavy boots booming across the floor as he approached. He circled the girl slowly, inspecting her as a butcher might inspect a prize animal. He ran a thick, clawed finger down the chain. The girl didn't flinch. She simply stared at Drax with the same quiet strength she had shown in the market. Drax chuckled darkly. "A pretty offering," he said. "But appearances are easy to fake." He turned back to Eric, his smile gone. "You say you control her," Drax said. "I say, prove it." Eric's heart tightened. He had expected this, but hearing it aloud made it worse. "Prove it," Drax repeated. "Command her. Show me she obeys without hesitation." He stepped back and crossed his arms. Around the hall, dozens of guards, slaves, and advisors leaned closer, eager for the show. Eric's mind raced. He could not hurt her. He would not. But if he refused to command her harshly, Drax would see it as weakness and kill them both. He needed another way. Eric knelt beside the girl, speaking softly where only she could hear. He didn't bark orders like a master. He didn't threaten like a slaver. Instead, he said 3 simple words. "Trust me." Now, for a heartbeat, the girl stared into his eyes, searching, deciding. Then, with a tiny nod almost too small to see, she understood. She knelt gracefully beside him, bowing her head low in the old style of submission used in ancient alien courts. The hall gasped in surprise. Drax's eyebrows rose. Eric stood slowly. He raised one hand. The girl rose to her feet in perfect timing. He moved forward 2 steps. She followed silently, matching his pace exactly, without force, without chains, only understanding. The watching crowd murmured in approval. Drax grunted, his sharp teeth flashing in a cruel grin. "Impressive," he said. He turned back toward his throne. "But the test is not finished." Eric froze. "What test?" he asked carefully. Drax laughed, a terrible echoing sound. "You will take her into the pit. 1 command, 1 danger. If she survives, you get your prize." The pit, Eric had heard of it. a place beneath the fortress where beasts, broken machines, and worse things lurked. No one survived the pit unless they were truly strong, or truly bonded. Eric clenched his fists. He had no choice. Not if he wanted the artifact. Not if he wanted to save Earth. He looked at the girl. She looked back. No fear. Only trust. "Fine," Eric said, his voice steady. "We'll do it." Drax clapped his hands once. Heavy doors creaked open at the side of the hall, revealing a stone staircase spiraling down into darkness. The guards pushed Eric and the girl toward it. As they descended, the fires above flickered and the cold crept closer. Below, in the pit, something snarled. A deep, wet sound filled with hunger. Eric tightened his grip on the girl's hand, not in control but in solidarity. Whatever waited in the dark, they would face it together. Above them, Drax's laughter followed like a shadow. The Overlord's game had begun. And Eric knew. This was a game where losing meant more than death. It meant damnation. The stairs spiraled down into darkness, the stone walls damp and cold against Eric's fingertips. The deeper they went, the colder it became, until even the fires of the fortress above seemed like a distant dream. Beside him, the alien girl moved. Without fear, her bare feet silent on the rough stone. She stayed close, her violet eyes alert, every muscle ready. At the bottom of the stairs, the pit opened before them, a massive arena, cracked and broken, surrounded by rusted metal fences. Strange growls echoed from the shadows. In the center of the pit, old bones littered the ground, evidence of those who had failed before them. On a raised platform above, Drax watched, surrounded by his guards and advisors. A heavy iron gate creaked open, and from the darkness beyond, a monster stepped into the pit. It was a beast unlike anything Eric had seen before. A mix of reptile and machine, its body was covered in thick armor plates stitched together with metal rods. Its mouth opened wide, revealing rows of jagged, smoking teeth. It let out a roar that shook the ground, thick saliva spraying from its jaws. The crowd above cheered wildly. Drax raised a hand and shouted, "One command, human! Make her face the beast, make her fight or die." Eric felt his stomach twist. He glanced at the girl. She stood calm, watching the creature, her breathing slow and steady. She didn't look at him with fear. She waited. For him, for his choice. Eric could order her to attack, could force her to sacrifice herself for the artifact. It would be easy. It would be expected. But as he stared into her steady, trusting eyes, Eric knew he couldn't do it. He couldn't be the monster Drax wanted him to be. Instead, Eric knelt beside her and spoke softly, close to her ear. "We fight smart. Together. Not like slaves. Like free ones." The girl blinked once, then smiled. A small, fierce smile that lit up her entire face. She understood. Eric rose to his feet, facing the roaring crowd above. He raised his hand high and shouted back, "I command her to survive, by her own will." The crowd gasped. Even Drax leaned forward, surprised. No one had ever given that kind of command before. The arena gates slammed shut behind them. The beast roared and charged. The ground shook with every step. Jason and the girl moved together. Not master and slave, not predator and prey, but partners. Eric distracted the beast, shouting and throwing broken stones at its armored head. The girl, quick as a shadow, darted between the monster's heavy feet, looking for weak spots. The creature swung a massive claw toward Eric, missing by inches. A second later, the girl leapt onto its back, climbing with the skill of a born hunter. She reached a gap in the armor near the beast's neck and drove a sharp shard of metal deep into the exposed flesh. The monster roared in pain, thrashing wildly. Eric saw his chance. He sprinted forward, using a broken spear to jab at the monster's legs, slowing it down. Together, they worked. Not to kill, but to survive. To endure. To stand when the galaxy expected them to fall. After long, brutal minutes, the beast staggered and fell with a heavy crash. It wasn't dead, but it was beaten, broken, and most importantly, alive. Eric stood over it, breathing hard, his arms shaking from exhaustion. The girl stood beside him, untouched, her eyes blazing with pride. Above them, Drax's court had fallen silent. No one cheered, no one mocked, because they had witnessed something greater than victory. They had seen loyalty, not forced by chains, not stolen by fear, but freely given. Drax rose from his throne, his face dark with rage, but he could not deny the truth. He had demanded proof of command. He had received proof of something far more dangerous: faith. Eric helped the girl to climb out of the pit first. Then he followed, head held high. He met Drax's furious gaze without flinching. "Our deal," Eric said simply. Drax's teeth bared in a snarl, but he nodded once, sharply. The Overlord was bound by the ancient rules of his court. A deal made in public in front of witnesses could not be broken without losing all honor. The artifact would be his. But Eric knew as he stood there with the girl at his side that this was no longer just about a deal. It was about something deeper, something worth fighting for. And Drax, powerful as he was, had no idea what he had just unleashed. The heavy iron doors groaned as they opened, revealing a narrow tunnel deep under Drax's fortress. The air here was colder, heavier, filled with a smell of rust, stone, and something else. Something ancient. Something wrong. 2 armored guards led Eric and the girl down the twisting path, their boots echoing sharply on the stone floor. The torches on the walls flickered wildly, as if even the fire feared this place. Eric said nothing. Neither did the girl. But their eyes met once. Silent agreement passing between them. Stay alert. Trust no one. At the end of the tunnel, a massive vault door waited, covered in strange symbols that pulsed faintly with red light. The guard stepped aside. From the HFY shadows, Drax himself appeared, holding a small key made of black bone. "You earned your prize, human," he growled. "But beware, some treasures bite back." He inserted the key. The vault rumbled and swung open, and inside, resting on a cracked pedestal of black stone, was the artifact. The Valorian cube. It was smaller than Eric had imagined. No bigger than a man's skull, the cube floated inches above the pedestal, spinning slowly, humming with a deep, unsettling energy. Its surface was covered in countless, shifting runes that seemed to move like living things. Colors bled across it: deep blue, fiery red, sickly green, changing faster than the eye could follow. And the moment Eric stepped closer, he heard it. A whisper, soft at first, then louder. Power, freedom, glory. The voice was not Drax's. It was something older, something far more dangerous. The cube was alive, and it was speaking directly into Eric's mind. He staggered back, clutching his head. The girl caught his arm, steadying him. Her touch was cool and grounding, breaking the cube's grip for a moment. Drax chuckled darkly. "You feel it, don't you?" he said. "That is why you came. The cube is pure potential. It will grant you anything, if you are strong enough." Eric straightened, forcing the whispers into the back of his mind. He looked at Drax, his eyes hard. "And if I'm not?" he asked. Drax's smile widened, showing sharp yellow teeth. "Then it will eat your mind," he said simply. "And your soul." The guard shifted uneasily. Even they didn't like being this close to the artifact. Eric stepped forward, again slower this time. The girl moved with him, her violet eyes locked on the cube. She seemed unaffected by the whispers. Or maybe the cube spoke differently to her. Maybe it feared her. Eric reached out, fingers brushing the artifact. A shock of energy jolted up his arm. Visions flooded his mind. Cities burning in green fire, armies kneeling before him, stars falling from the sky like rain, and at the center of it all, himself, crowned in darkness, ruling over a dead galaxy. He yanked his hand back, gasping for air. The cube spun faster, whispering more urgently. Take me, use me, become a god. Eric wiped the sweat from his forehead. He understood now. The cube didn't just grant power. It created monsters. It tempted you with your deepest desires, and then twisted you into something unrecognizable, something unforgivable. Drax clapped his hands sharply. "Take it!" he barked. "The deal is done. You survived the pit. The girl is mine." At the mention of the girl, Eric's stomach twisted. He turned to look at her. She stood still, proud, silent. But in her eyes he saw it, a tiny flicker of fear. Not for herself, for him, for what the cube would do, for what he might become. Eric's fists clenched. He could take the artifact. He could leave. He could save Earth. Maybe. But at what cost? Would he still be himself? Would he still be human? The cube whispered again, sweet as poisoned honey. Take me. Save them. Be their hero. Eric closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. When he opened them, his choice was made. He would take the cube. But he would not lose himself. Not now. Not ever. And if Drax thought he was handing over the girl to a monster, he was about to learn what it truly meant to deal with a human. As Eric reached for the cube one final time, his mind sharpened into perfect clarity. This was no longer just a trade, no longer just a mission. It was a rescue, a rebellion, and it would start right here, right now, in the heart of the darkest place in the galaxy. Eric's fingers hovered inches from the cube, the whispers clawing at his mind. Above, on the platform, Overlord Drax watched him with a gleam of cold satisfaction. The deal was made. The prize was within reach. Everything was perfect. Or so it seemed. In the stillness of that moment, Eric felt it. A shift in the air, a ripple of danger. He didn't hesitate. Without touching the cube, he spun around just in time to see Drax signal his guards. A dozen warriors burst from the shadows, weapons drawn, rushing toward Eric and the girl. Betrayal, fast and brutal. Eric shoved the girl behind him as a plasma blade sliced through the air where his head had been a second earlier. He grabbed a broken spear from the floor and swung hard, knocking one guard back into another. "No witnesses," Drax roared from above. "Kill them both, the cube is mine." The girl moved like a flash of silver light, ducking low and sweeping the legs of a charging guard. She grabbed his weapon, a short, curved dagger, and tossed it to Eric. He caught it without thinking. Together, they fought. Not as master and slave. Not as human and alien, but as something far stronger, as partners, as survivors. The guards were brutal, well-trained, but they weren't ready for Eric's stubborn fury, or for the girl's speed. One by one, the attackers fell. But more poured into the chamber, drawn by the noise. Eric realized grimly. They couldn't win by fighting alone. They needed a bigger weapon. His eyes flicked back to the cube still spinning lazily above its pedestal, still whispering, still waiting. He didn't want its power, but he needed it now. For survival. For freedom. For her. "Cover me!" Eric shouted. The girl nodded without hesitation. She darted forward, distracting the nearest guards, moving so fast they could barely track her. Eric sprinted to the cube. The moment his hand touched it, a wave of searing energy rushed through him. Visions stabbed his mind again. Fire, war, endless screams. He fought them off, gritting his teeth. He wasn't here to rule. He wasn't here to destroy. He was here to save. "Help me," he whispered fiercely to the cube. "Or die with me." For a second, the cube hesitated. Then it responded. The runes across its surface flared with a blinding light. The ground shook. The walls cracked, and every machine, every weapon in the fortress went mad. Blasters exploded in their owners' hands. Doors slammed shut. Lights flickered and died. Chaos swallowed the fortress whole. Drax bellowed in rage. He leapt down from his throne. landing heavily near Eric. The Overlord's massive fists swung like wrecking balls. Eric dodged barely in time, feeling the rush of air past his face. "You dare?" Drax roared. "You dare betray me?" Eric laughed harshly, blood running from a cut on his forehead. "You betrayed me first," he shouted back. The girl slipped behind Drax, cutting deep into the back of his knee with the stolen dagger. The Overlord howled in pain, dropping to one knee. Eric didn't hesitate. He drove the cube forward, not into Drax's heart, but into his mind. The artifact's glow wrapped around Drax's head like a net of fire. The Overlord screamed, thrashing wildly. The cube wasn't just a weapon. It was a mirror. It showed Drax every terrible thing he had ever done, every life he had crushed, every soul he had betrayed. And in the end, it broke him. Drax collapsed with a final, shuddering roar, his body crumpling into the dust, defeated, cursed, and imprisoned by his own sins. The hall fell silent. The surviving guards dropped their weapons and fled into the dark. The girl walked slowly to Eric's side. Her violet eyes were wide, not with fear but with wonder. "You did it," she whispered. Eric wiped blood from his brow and looked around the shattered throne room. "No," he said quietly. "We did it." He met her gaze, steady and sure. And in that look, in that shared silence, a bond stronger than any chain was forged. They had survived, together. But Eric knew the fight was not over yet, because somewhere deep inside the cube's cold heart, a darker voice was still waiting, whispering promises of glory, waiting for the right moment to rise again. The fortress shook under the weight of its own betrayal. Smoke curled through the broken halls, fires crackling from fallen torches. The walls, once symbols of Drax's power, now stood cracked and bleeding light. Eric and the girl moved quickly through the chaos, the cube humming faintly in his hand. Behind them, the terrified guards fled into the jungle, their loyalty to Drax shattered. But ahead, deeper inside the fortress, something even more important waited. The prisoners. Hundreds of them. Slaves from a dozen worlds, locked in iron cages, forgotten in the darkness. And now, with Drax defeated, they had a chance at something they hadn't known in years. Freedom. The first cell door creaked open under Eric's hand. Inside, thin, broken figures blinked at the sudden light, too scared to even move. The girl knelt beside them, speaking softly, in a language Eric didn't know but understood through her tone. "You are safe, you are free." Slowly, one by one, they crawled out. A woman with green skin clutching her child. A boy with golden eyes who had forgotten what the sky looked like. An old man who simply cried, whispering thanks over and over. Eric moved from cage to cage, breaking locks, smashing control panels. Each time, more faces joined them. More hope grew. Word spread like wildfire through the fortress. The Overlord is dead. The human has broken the chains. Rise. In the great hall where once Drax had ruled with blood and terror, the freed prisoners gathered, weak, starving, but burning with something stronger than hunger, with anger, with purpose. Eric climbed the broken steps of the throne and turned to face them. He didn't shout. He didn't order. He spoke simply. "You have a choice," he said, his voice rough but strong. "You can run, hide, live in fear." He lifted the cube slightly, letting its light spill across the hall. "Or you can fight. Stand. Take back everything they stole." The crowd shifted. Whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into roars. Old warriors clenched fists. Mothers lifted their children high. Young ones picked up fallen weapons from the ground. They would not run. Not this time. The girl stepped beside Eric, her violet eyes blazing. She raised her voice clear and proud. For every chain broken, for every voice silenced, for every life stolen, the crowd answered with a thunderous cry, "We rise!" The ground trembled with the force of it. Across the fortress, the remaining guards, few and frightened, fled without looking back. The age of Drax was over. The age of the forgotten had begun. As the stars rose over the ruined fortress, Eric stood at the gates, the girl beside him, the cube dim and silent in his hands. He looked over the faces of the freed, exhausted, wounded, but smiling, alive. He had come here for a weapon. He had found something far greater, an army of the broken, an army of the brave, an army ready to change the galaxy, not through conquest, but through unity, through hope, through the simple, stubborn human belief that even in the darkest places, freedom can be born. But deep inside the cube, something still stirred. Watching, waiting. It had tasted Eric's heart, and it had not given up, not yet, because power never sleeps, and temptation never dies. The sun rose bloody red over the ruins of Drax's fortress. Smoke curled into the morning sky, carrying with it the last whispers of a fallen tyrant. Eric stood at the heart of the broken courtyard, the cube heavy in his hand, the weight of 1,000 choices pressing down on him. Around him, the freed slaves worked together, building shelter from the rubble, tending to the wounded, burying the dead. A new world was being born here, but not without a price, and not without a final decision. The girl, no longer chained, no longer nameless, stood beside him. She had chosen a name now. Soraya, it meant one who stands in her old tongue, and she had earned it. They both had. But the cube still pulsed faintly in Eric's grip, whispering promises of endless power, endless glory. He could keep it, use it, shape the galaxy into anything he wished. No one would stop him. No one could. But then he looked around at the faces of those he had freed. Children playing in the ashes, old warriors laughing for the first time in years, and he remembered why he had come here in the first place. Not to rule, not to destroy, but to save, to build, to hope. Soraya placed her hand gently over his. "You are strong," she said quietly. "But strength is not in what you hold." She tapped his chest lightly, smiling. "Strength is in what you protect." Eric closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, he had made his choice. He would not be another Drax. He would not trade blood for power. He would not lose himself. Not now. Not ever. They carried the cube deep into the jungle, far beyond, the ruins of the fortress, to a place the villagers called the heart of the world, a crater filled with ancient vines and glowing stones, untouched by machines or war. There, standing at the edge of a deep abyss, Eric looked down at the cube one. Last time its whispers grew frantic. "Keep me. Rule them, become legend." Eric smiled sadly. "I don't need to be a legend," he said. He tossed the cube into the abyss. The artifact screamed, an unearthly sound that echoed through the trees as it fell into darkness. And then, silence. Real silence. Not fear, not oppression, just peace. When Eric and Soraya returned to the village, the people gathered around them. They had seen the cube's light vanish. They knew the human had made his choice, not for himself, for them, for all of them. The High Elder, once a broken slave himself, stepped forward. He placed a hand on Eric's shoulder. "Today," he said, "you have not just freed our bodies, you have freed our spirits." The villagers knelt before Eric and Soraya, not as slaves, but as equals, as family, as the first citizens of a new beginning. Later, as the stars bloomed across the night sky, Eric sat by the fire with Soraya. He watched the flames dance and thought about Earth, about home. He could leave now. He could find another ship, return to his people, tell his story. But a different future called to him now. Here, among these survivors, here where trust was stronger than chains, here, where a single human's choice had changed the destiny of worlds. And so it began. Not with an army, not with a crown, but with a campfire, a promise, a stubborn human heart, and across the stars, stories would be told, beware the humans, for they will trade you nothing but loyalty, and with it, they will burn empires to the ground. A deal had been made long ago in blood, but Eric had rewritten it, with hope, with fire, with freedom. And this time, the stars themselves bore witness.